So good to be back with you at Bible study. Thank you all that attended the class, both in person and online. Remember, next week, if you're in person, we'll be at the Christie House Library, and we will be reading the Gospel of Matthew. Hello, New Testament. We're looking forward to being in the New Testament, some land we're familiar with. But we end our time in the Old Testament with Ezra Nehemiah. It is historically one book, divided up into two books for reasons that I don't quite know. Anyway, it is the fulfillment of the prophecies. So what happened? We have great leaders of the past. We have Moses and Abraham. We have Solomon and David. We have Saul. And as wonderful as they are, they all they all end up being human, which means they all fail at some level, and the community fails and falls apart, and the prophets warned the community to abide in God, and they don't quite get it. They can't quite keep within the lines of the covenant. And the two things that really disappoint God, it seems, is that they worship other gods, and they are unjust to people in need. And so the prophets warn about that, and they say you're going to be tossed out. But then a remnant will be saved, and you'll come back. And so, sure enough, right? The Babylonians, ultimately the Assyrians first in Israel, and the Babylonians in Judah, depopulate the place. They take the Israelites, particularly their leaders, back to Babylon. They're there for 70 years, and God does this through the Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian leader, a Gentile for sure, right? That comes in and depopulates Israel. But then God does the same thing, this time with Artaxerxes and Cyrus, to bring the people back. So it's interesting. So these two stories, this one story, Ezra and Nehemiah, really it's God doing the same thing, using an outsider, this time to bring the Jewish community back to Israel. It's fabulous. And so we start with Zerubbabel, and he is the one that Cyrus uses to lead the people back to go and rebuild the temple. And so a community of the Hebrew people leave Babylon, and they go back, and what they find when they arrive back in Jerusalem, surprising to them but not to anybody that thinks about it, is people. There are people there. And so they set about to rebuild the temple, and neighbors who are living there want to help. And the leadership says, no, we don't want you. And so this is, the rebuilding the temple is the hope, right? Zerubbabel is the leader. Cyrus is the king. They come and rebuild, the hope that God will repopulate the temple. And that God will return by their faithfulness is what they hope. The neighbors ask to help. They tell them, no, go away. And when they're finally done rebuilding the temple, God doesn't appear in any dramatic way. Right? The box that they had built for God to move into, where they could have access to God and, I guess in a way, control God, God doesn't abide by that in the way that God had for them historically. And the elders in the community are disappointed. They're disappointed, and so are the neighbors who sort of wander away. And then Ezra comes, and he goes to Artaxerxes and says, I want to go back. And he goes without any armed guards. He goes just through faith, and he goes and he seeks to reinvigorate the community around covenantal relationship with the Torah. And they all gather, and they're excited, but some gather with their foreign wives. And so here Ezra steps in under his own volition, not God's command, divides them up and sends them away. And that sort of ends anticlimactically. And then Nehemiah, the great cupbearer to the king, Artaxerxes, he's sad one day, and the king asks him why he's sad, and he says, because things in Jerusalem aren't going so well. He says, go Go with troops. Go and take care of the place. And so he does, and he gets there and he builds the wall. And the kingdoms beyond the rivers are agitated, but they build the wall so quickly they can't do anything. He draws in all the community of people that live around the temple, and they come and they help, and they get the walls up, and then they sort of fade away. Again, anticlimactic. The hope of the temple, the hope of the Torah, the hope of the wall. But then the exclusion and the division and the dwindling takes place. And so that's the book of Ezra and the first 7 chapters of Nehemiah. And then in chapter 8 and through 12, we see sort of a spiritual renewal, right? The people are reading the Bible. There's a 7-day reading festival of the Torah. They confess their sins. They return to God. They renew the covenant, and they celebrate with booths that they build. And it's good. It's looking good. Like finally, the community has been reinvigorated and is coming together. And then Nehemiah goes on a business trip. He heads back to see Artaxerxes. Spends some time in Babylon, a couple of years, and then he comes back to Jerusalem. And what he finds when he arrives back in Jerusalem is deeply disappointing to him. What he finds is the temple is a mess. It's a hot mess. He finds that the Sabbath isn't kept. He finds that people are in mixed marriages again, and he sends them away. And the book ends with him saying, God, I don't know about all these people. Just what about me? And so we have this story of these leaders that is really not, it's a downer in a sense. Right? There is a diminishment of the community. The new heart that Ezekiel and Jeremiah talked about, that they believed that they would find when they rebuilt the temple and they rebuilt the walls and they rededicated themselves to the Torah, did not materialize. It did not happen. Right? And even the spiritual up came with the spiritual down. And that's where we finish our Old Testament conversation. That's where it comes to an end, with this down, with the continued hard hearts, with the continued dislocation from community, which is where we will pick up next week in the Gospel of Matthew. Thanks for being with me. I hope you go to the concert that's tonight or tomorrow night, and I certainly look forward to seeing you at church on Sunday. Peace upon your souls.